For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Reehove. Journalist and author Irma Venter joins me to discuss her prize-winning crime thriller Skoenlapper, published by Human Rousseau in June 2012, and the sequel Skrapnel, published in July 2013. Welcome, Irma.
Thanks, Shannon.
Crime fiction as a genre is on the rise in South Africa. Why do you think this is the case, and what draws you to writing crime thrillers?
I think many reasons crime thrillers are becoming more and more popular, and I think the big thing is probably that there's at the heart of the crime thriller lies the riddle. There's a question and it needs answering, and everybody loves to solve a riddle. So it's all up to the writer to put together this riddle, and then for the reader to see whether they can solve it before the writer intends for it to happen. So I think that lies at the heart of it. It explores probably the best and worst in terms of human emotion. So you've got everything there, the worst of the sins, greed and corruption, and it's all there, murder, mayhem, and then you've got the good guys battling the bad guys. So I also think it speaks to our sort of South African sense for justice, because a crime novel also always, the end is always a good ending to a degree. Most of them always offer a good ending. So you've got the bad guys go to jail and the good guys prevail, and we all feel that justice has prevailed. So that works for us, I think, maybe as a South African society as well, because we live with crime every day, and it doesn't always get solved, but in a crime thriller it does. So I think maybe that speaks to some deep core part of us being South African. Maybe also, in terms of maybe a larger society, we can see that we may be moving beyond 1994 and the baggage that we all brought with us. So maybe we're just moving to telling normal South African stories. Stories that you'd find in France, that you'd find in Germany. So we're just telling the normal love story or the normal crime thriller, and maybe adding a little bit to the genres the stories that we're already telling in South Africa. Myself, I love crime thrillers. I've always loved crime thrillers. I've grew up with them. I've read them. I watch them on TV. So to me, it's a personal joy, literally, to put the riddle together and then hopefully to outsmart the reader, which I can't really say that I've achieved. You can never say if you've achieved it, but I keep on hoping, and maybe next time I do it better.
What research do you do before you write a book? Are there rules for writing crime fiction?
Do a lot of research, because people will often tell you very quickly once you've made a mistake. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge, so you have to honor that and honor the reader and make sure that you get your facts right. So I'll do a lot of reading, a lot of research. I've got a host of people helping me as well. So I've got 2 retired police officers, high-ranking police officers. They normally help me with my research. And then I also have a doctor for the new book that I'm working on. For example, it's very strange the things that you have to learn when you write crime novels. How long does it take what kind of wound do you have to sustain to live 20 minutes? Because I needed this character to be alive for 20 minutes. And what kind of knife wounds would you then have him sustain? So it's these are the kind of things that you do research on, and you speak to very expert people, and you do a bit of Google, a bit of research, you look for a credible source. Also, again, as I say, to honor the reader. Readers are very smart in South Africa, and you have to outsmart them if it comes down to that. Also, rules. I don't have particular rules when it comes to crime thrillers, but I know there are a lot out there, and I seem to a little bit break them mostly. Elmore Leonard, for example, he passed away earlier this year as well. I think he said you can't write about the weather. I mean, when you look at Skoenlapper, it's all about the weather. It's all about a big flood in Tanzania. So that breaks one of those rules. He also was a stickler for not using adverbs or any adjectives or anything like that. He said it's important for a character not to have a phrase of dialogue and then you end it with "she said bitterly." He said, why do you have to add the bitterly? The dialogue, the story, the process have to indicate the emotion of what you're writing. A lot of rules, but I think in the end, whatever makes the story tick over, whatever makes the reader just turn to the next page, wondering what's going to happen next, I think that means it's working. That means you keeping the line of tension running, and you make the reader turn over to the next page, and you get to the end. So whatever you need to do that, I think that's fine.
Does being a journalist help shape the world when you sit down and write?
It definitely does. I think being a journalist, as you probably know, you meet a different type of person and a different person every day. So the exposure that you have to the human condition or the human nature is just extraordinary. And you deal with a variety of emotions. You deal with somebody who's achieved something, who's won something, who's developed something, who's innovated something, and then you deal with people who are being arrested, who've done something wrong, faces court charges. So you deal with all of that, and when you sit down and write and you have to create characters, I think it just allows you to create a more in-depth character that you can actually then write into that book that people can associate with because they see it in the newspapers every day.
Have you ever based any of your characters on some of the people you've met?
A little bit. I'm very careful not to do that, because especially your friends and family as well, because they keep on looking for themselves in your books. Cause it's just, I think it's something that happens, and you try to avoid that. You don't want to alienate the people you love, or the people you have to interview, or the people you've interviewed. So you do little kind of bits that you find interesting, that you find intriguing, and you kind of morph them all into one and create this character that you, again, then either try the reader to fall in love with or to loathe.
And I suppose then they could relate to a certain character because they feel like, I feel that way sometimes too.
I think it's very important, because the most important love affair for me is not between two characters necessarily on the pages, it's between the reader and the character. So it's important for me that the reader thinks, I know this person, I've met somebody like this, I like this character, what is this character going to do next? And you've got to keep that emotion alive.
And the way you describe them as well.
Yes, definitely. You've got to pique people's interest and make them think, wow, what's going to happen next? This is a really interesting person. They can literally do anything. So what's going to happen next?
You make use of short chapters, sort of like a sequence. Is this intentional?
It definitely is. I think I try to make it easy for people to read the book. So I think in today's world I can understand that you do not necessarily have 3 or 4 hours to sit down and read. You're going to do little bits of reading. You're going to be in the hard train, maybe you've got half an hour, you're waiting to pick up the kids, or you're waiting at a soccer game or whatever, you're reading this book. So I can understand that you maybe just want to have a break in between chapters and then put the book down and then be able to pick it up again. And also I do visualize when I write, so you tend to start thinking in sequences, in a visual sequence, and then you can't stretch that out over too many pages, because then I think people get bored easily as well. So you've got to keep it ticking over, and I think the whole short chapter thing just makes that easier to happen.
I can especially relate to that, considering that I'm English speaking and still managed to finish the book.
I'm so impressed that you read this book in Afrikaans.
And it's not difficult at all. Now, Africa and India feature settings in both your books. Why did you choose this area as opposed to, say, Europe or Germany or the UK?
I'm very fond of Africa, and I think people underappreciate Africa. All of us living here, and I think people out there. Just to give you an example, the day before yesterday, I did an interview with a guy. He's doing business in South Africa, and he has a US supplier. And the guy phoned him from the US and say, I've got some business for you. Can you quickly pop in there? The guy's in Togo. So, and I mean, the guy's based in Johannesburg. So people don't necessarily have a concept of Africa, that it's 50 countries, that we're different nations, different languages. I think people tend to see Africa as this huge blob somewhere on the map, and that's not true. We're a wonderful, rich continent with wonderful, rich people, culture and heritage and languages. And it's important for me to maybe highlight this and to break it down. So you'll see, I plan to write about Namibia still, and definitely I loved writing about Tanzania, and I was there for work as well and for a bit of leisure as well. So I really enjoyed doing that. As well, India is also about developing countries. I mean, in developing countries in itself has got an interesting dynamic, because my characters, I don't write police procedures. So they operate kind of outside the law, and unfortunately also it's true that in developing countries it's kind of easier for that to happen. And versus a very strict police setup maybe you've got in Scandinavian countries or in some European countries. So it just makes it easier for me to write as well. And apart from the fact that I really love highlighting the wonderful cultures in those countries.
Irma, you've chosen to write your book in Afrikaans. Why did you make this decision, and are there any chances that it's going to be translated?
Well, first of all, I would hope it maybe gets translated, but that's up to the publisher, that's up to demand. So we'll see how market economics dictate. The other question, it's Afrikaans is my mother tongue, so it's a language you're born in, language you first hear. So it's just easier and natural when you write about emotions. I mean, for a journalist, I write and I interview in English every day. So it's I feel that I can handle English, that I can write English when it comes to journalism, but not necessarily when it comes to what you write in a novel and in fiction. It's just easier to do it in Afrikaans.
It's very easy Afrikaans to understand, so I think English-speaking people could definitely understand the book?
I didn't want to write any highbrow type of book. I wanted to write a easy to read, enjoyable Afrikaans fiction. I mean, it's a bit of an Afrikaans cultural thing that we had this history of very highbrow literature in Afrikaans. It was the only thing worth reading, the only thing worth watching. If it's this kind of very high quality supposed literature, and we are slowly but surely maturing as an Afrikaans market and moving away from that and moving into saying that it's okay if you want to read a romance, it's okay if you want to read a crime thriller. These are all good books, good stories put together. Enjoy them. You don't have to feel guilty if you do.
Now, when it comes to books and reading, what are you passionate about, and who are your favorite writers?
I've got many favorite writers. One of them is especially Alexandra Fuller and the books that she writes on Africa. So it's just amazing. Little Prince is my personal favorite book of all times. Crime novels, I really love the female writers, mostly probably the Americans, Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, Karen Slaughter, and Tess Gerritsen, and those people. But I have to say that the ladies are getting rather bloody in the way that they are writing. The second to last, I think, Karen Slaughter, I had to put down for a month or so because I just couldn't read it any further, because just the way the women in her books were being tortured. So, which is kind of an interesting development as well in terms of crime thrillers, I have to say. So I'm passionate about reading, I'm passionate about books, I'm passionate about libraries. And I would love to see a library in every community, every township in South Africa, as sort of a safe haven where kids can go and do their homework, read a book, and feel safe and be in this environment where they're intellectually stimulated.
So you prefer hardcover or actual physical books rather than a Kindle?
I think everyone's got their space. Every one of those, a Kindle, definitely if you travel, a Kindle, even if it's your preference. I just think if you talk about libraries in townships or in small communities, nobody steals books these days. So it's just one of those things that you probably it's going to be a safer or a more secure environment if you just put physical books there and you don't put computers there. So I think libraries have their own special place, especially in poorer communities where I think crime is maybe more prevalent.
Finally, can we expect any other books from you in future?
I am working on the third one. It's again a title with an S. It's, I seem to be stuck on them. It's called Spookawesome. So it kind of loses its translation in English because it doesn't refer to the candy floss but rather to the ghost breath. So I had a bit of a play of word on that. So I'm working hard on it. I'm hoping maybe by the end of next year we'll see how things go. So yeah, I'm hoping to continue where I started.
Well, congratulations, and I look forward to reading the rest.
Thanks, Shanna.
That was author Irma Venter speaking about her crime thrillers Skoenlapper and Skrapnel.